There is a type of silent suffering that thousands of people face daily, but which rarely receives the name or attention it deserves. It is not exactly sadness, nor physical exhaustion, nor even pure anxiety. It is an overwhelming sense of weight, an invisible burden that makes every small movement, every simple task, a Herculean effort. Waking up already feels like a battle won. Taking a shower, responding to messages, preparing a meal, all of this seems to require a strength that simply is no longer there. And the cruelest part is that often the person themselves begins to blame themselves for it. I'm weak. I'm lazy. I lack discipline. But what if this narrative is completely wrong? What if what you call weakness is actually a legitimate physiological symptom of a silently collapsing nervous system? Kelly McGonigal, a psychologist at Stanford University, has spent years investigating this phenomenon in populations under extreme stress. Caregivers of terminal patients, professionals in deep burnout, overwhelmed single parents, and her conclusion is clear. The weight these people feel is not a character flaw. It is a chronic biological response of a body living in a state of constant threat. The brains of these individuals literally can no longer differentiate between a common task and a real danger. Every unanswered email, every pending commitment, every postponed decision, everything is interpreted by the body as if it were a life or death situation. This response, called survival mode, activates hormonal circuits that completely drain energy reserves. And the more the body tries to react, the more it exhausts itself. That's why, for those in this state, even rest seems ineffective. They sleep but wake up tired. They take a break but remain exhausted. They avoid tasks, but the weight doesn't go away. Because the problem is not the number of tasks, but how the body is interpreting each one as a threat. And this is where science brings a revolution. McGonigal discovered that it is not necessary to eliminate sources of stress. Something that, let's face it, is often impossible. What needs to be done is to regulate the nervous system so that it stops interpreting everything as an emergency. This change does not depend on long therapy or transcendental meditation. It can start with simple practices based on neuroscience that help the body move out of constant war mode and into a state of regulation. Controlled breathing, gentle movement, brief connection with nurturing people, sleep hygiene, small changes with measurable physiological impact. What this video will show is that feeling everything as heavy does not mean you are failing at life. It means your body is begging for help. And the good news, there are practical, scientific, and proven ways to make this weight lighter, not by eliminating what burdens you, but by strengthening the system that carries it. Let's understand, from cutting-edge psychology, how this chronic overload works, what it is trying to communicate, and most importantly, what you can start doing today to break this cycle. Because you don't need to be stronger. You need to stop harming yourself with strategies that only worsen the problem, and it all starts with understanding the truth behind the weight. Next, we will dive into the invisible workings of this physiological state and why it traps so many people in silence. Behind the feeling of carrying the world on your shoulders lies a precise biological explanation, repeatedly observed in the studies of Kelly McGonigal and other stress neuroscience researchers. When a person lives under constant pressure, emotional, financial, professional, or existential, the body enters a state of permanent alert. This state is mediated by the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the system responsible for releasing hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, substances created to protect the organism in dangerous situations. The problem is that this mechanism, designed to be activated only in emergencies, begins to function as a continuous operating pattern. The body does not know that the danger is now a spreadsheet, a difficult conversation, or an internal demand. It reacts as if it were a real threat. The modern mind, overwhelmed by notifications, expectations and comparisons triggers the same circuit that our ancestors used to flee from predators. The result is a collapsing physiology. The heart races, breathing becomes shallow, the digestive system slows down, muscles tense, and the mind becomes hypervigilant, ready to react to any stimulus. This combination creates a subjective feeling of weight, not symbolic, but physical. Life begins to feel dense, as if each thought carries a ton. McGonigal observed this pattern in people who, at first glance, seemed strong. Doctors dealing with terminal patients, single parents supporting entire families, professionals in high-performance environments. They all reported the same thing: the progressive loss of the ability to react. The body enters survival mode and begins to shut down non-essential functions. Creativity, empathy, pleasure, concentration, everything is suspended. The mind reduces its operation to the minimum necessary. Just keep functioning. It is at this point that many people describe feeling like robots, operating on autopilot. They are not living, they are merely surviving. The most unsettling part is that this physiological state does not depend solely on the external environment. It is amplified by the way we interpret stress. As McGonigal shows in The Upside of Stress, the belief that stress is destructive increases its toxicity. People who believe they are being destroyed by stress release more cortisol and exhibit higher levels of inflammation. In contrast, those who see stress as an adaptive response, a sign that the body is trying to help, have a completely different biological response. Blood vessels remain relaxed, the heart pumps more efficiently, and the mind becomes more focused. Perception alters biology. In other words, the weight is not just a result of the number of obligations, but of the meaning the body assigns to them. If each task is interpreted as a threat, the nervous system remains stuck in fight or flight mode. This is the true enemy, not the list of responsibilities, but the internal circuit that transforms them into dangers. And the most dangerous part is that the longer one remains in this state, the more the body adapts to it. The survival mode becomes the new normal. The person forgets what it is like to live in a state of safety. But there is a way out. McGonigal discovered that it is possible to reset this system, literally training the body to exit threat mode and return to a state of balance. This reset does not require drastic changes, just consistent practices that re-educate the nervous system not to react with panic to every daily stimulus. It is science teaching something that ancient wisdom has always known. The body needs to learn to trust again. And that is exactly what we will see next. The first of these practices is simple but powerful enough to change your physiological state in minutes. A breathing method that interrupts the threat cycle and restores the body's ability to feel safe. In the next segment, we will explore the protocol known as stress reset breathing, the tool that can initiate the reprogramming process of your nervous system. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Among all the tools that modern neuroscience offers for those living in constant overload, few are as accessible, quick, and effective as controlled breathing. The protocol named by Kelly McGonigal as stress reset breathing is not just a relaxation technique. It is a direct physiological intervention in the autonomic nervous system. When performed correctly, this practice has the power to literally change your body's state in just a few minutes, pulling it out of fight or flight mode and leading it into a state of restoration and safety. To understand why this works, it is necessary to comprehend the role of the vagus nerve. This nerve is one of the main communication routes between the brain and the body, especially between the brain and the internal organs. It is responsible for activating the so-called parasympathetic system, known as the rest and digest mode. When the vagus nerve is stimulated, the body understands that it is safe. Heart rate decreases, breathing deepens, muscle tension reduces, and the mind quiets. It is the exact opposite of the stress response. Breathing is one of the few bodily functions that we can consciously control, and that, in turn, directly influences the functioning of the vagus nerve. This is where the power of the technique lies. The protocol is simple. Inhale slowly for 4 seconds, hold the breath for another 4 seconds, and then exhale for 6 seconds. The key is in the longer exhalation than inhalation. This detail is essential, as it activates vagal mechanisms that signal to the brain that the environment is safe. This cycle should be repeated for at least 2 minutes, 3 times a day, or whenever the weight becomes unbearable. The goal is not just to relax momentarily, but to retrain the nervous system not to collapse in the face of everyday stimuli. People who have consistently applied this technique report remarkable changes: a reduction in the feeling of panic in the face of simple tasks, greater mental clarity, and even better sleep quality. McGonigal observed that after a week of practice, many individuals who seemed stuck in a state of paralysis began to resume small actions with more autonomy. They did not become stronger overnight, but their bodies stopped reacting as if every decision were a threat. And that changed everything. More important than the protocol itself is what it represents. The first step in reclaiming physiological autonomy. By practicing intentional breathing, the individual sends a clear message to their body. We are safe. We can stop fighting. This message, repeated daily, has the power to reverse ingrained patterns of hypervigilance and chronic exhaustion. It is an exercise in sovereignty. You cease to be a hostage to your nervous system's automatic responses and begin to take control of your internal state. Of course, breathing alone is not a magic cure. It opens the door, but the path requires continuity. And it is precisely on this path that the next intervention discovered by McGonigal comes in: regenerative movement. When the body is overloaded, most people try to resolve this with absolute rest, or at the opposite extreme, pushing themselves into intense workouts in an attempt to sweat out the stress. Both strategies are wrong. What the body really needs is different. In the next segment, we will explore how gentle movement, rather than extreme effort, can metabolize the accumulated stress hormones in your body and make room for true physical and emotional recovery. When everything feels heavy, the body's natural tendency is to collapse or withdraw. Yet, it is precisely in this state that many people make the most common mistake. They try to react with brute force. They believe that to overcome the weight, they need to push themselves to produce more, to train harder, to be more disciplined. But this mindset, although well-intentioned, often worsens the already compromised physiological state. Kelly McGonigal reveals, based on rigorous research, that a body in a state of chronic overload does not need more pressure. It needs release. When stress accumulates, the body releases a series of hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. These chemical compounds are useful in acute situations, as they mobilize energy quickly. However, when they remain circulating in the body for an extended period without being metabolized, they become toxic. This is where the fundamental role of regenerative movement comes in. The science is clear. It is not about running miles or lifting heavy weights. It is about activating the muscles and the cardiorespiratory system in a gentle, constant, and safe way, allowing the body to eliminate the excess accumulated stress hormones. McGonigal observed that intense exercise in people in a state of exhaustion not only does not help, but exacerbates the problem. The nervous system already interprets everything as a threat, subjecting the body to exhausting